Cobra Kai was able to tell the redemption story of a once defeated antagonist as Johnny Lawrence returned to teach a brand new generation of students. As old rivalries resparked and new ones begin to rise, Cobra Kai became a smash hit on YouTube and then Netflix, lasting a total of 6 seasons with 65 episodes. Once the finale debuted on Netflix, many fans were eager to see what was next for the franchise if it were to continue. As for right now, Karate Kid Legends has been the latest project in the Miyagi-verse, totaling 6 films. However, fans are still eager to see the story continue in this universe, as the idea of spin-offs has still been tossed around. From fans, the actors themselves, and the creators, many have had ideas of what the spin-offs could look like to continue to keep the franchise alive. We continue to receive news that these may be in development. So, for today, I will be pitching 3 spin-off shows and uniting them in one final showdown. Like I said, we have 3 spin-off ideas to discuss, and the way I'll do this is I'll describe the idea of the spin-off and explain 5 episodes that entail the story. Then we will end it all in one final film. The spin-offs each will feature one of the 3 main pairs of the main 6 kids. Now, I do feel the need to acknowledge that the final story has the most detail out of all 3 due to it being the first story I came up with, but it also has the most holes. The others eventually came to me a little while later. Now, some of these stories were more difficult to flesh out than others, so I will do my best to allow each one to have its own details and its own time to breathe and its own time to shine. But with all that being said, let's begin with our first spin-off. Our first spin-off would continue the story of the daughter of Daniel LaRusso and El Serpiente, as we follow Miguel Diaz and Samantha LaRusso in their visit to Okinawa. This story will basically be Sam and Miguel's version of Karate Kid Part 2, as they get to experience many of the moments of Daniel's journey and his impact on Tomi Village. Now, a fun detail I didn't mention is that each of these projects will have a connection to a Karate Kid project that may not have been represented during Cobra Kai's original run. And you'll see that as we enter episode 1. Our story begins after Cobra Kai season 6, as Miguel and Sam arrive in Okinawa. The two are greeted by Chosen Taguchi, who is there to help guide Sam in her pursuit to explore Miyagi-Do history in her free time alongside Miguel. Here, Chosen introduces Sam and Miguel to a new character named Taki. This is where that connection would actually take place, because this connects to the show Karate Kid, the animated series. Yes, there was a Karate Kid show before Cobra Kai. Taki was a young Miyagi-Do student who Daniel and Mr. Miyagi helped retrieve an ancient shrine. In this universe, Taki studied Miyagi-Do with a mix of Kung Fu from Mr. Han's family. The group would be able to visit Shohashi Castle as their journey begins under their brand new senseis. Episode 2 would begin with Taki telling Miguel and Sam about Miyagi-Do's history, and even bits of history between Mr. Han and Mr. Miyagi's family. Taki would inform them of the strength of Miyagi-Do's roots, and Sam realizes that the stories that Mr. Miyagi and Daniel told her when she was younger were true, but exaggerated. Making a joke that the cartoon episodes are basically bedtime stories that were told to them that were based on a real event. Chosen and Taki would use Sato and Mr. Han's training to build the bond between Sam and Miguel. And that's the main point of this series, to build up the relationship between the two of them. Episode 3 would introduce something brand new, because Miguel and Sam are excited to participate in the Obon dance, but they also find out of something known as the Obon Karate Tournament. Taki and Chosen inform Sam and Miguel that this was a tournament that started for Miyagi-Do students in honor of what Daniel and Mr. Miyagi did that inspired Sato to take care of Tomi Village. But they find out that recently, a rival dojo led by a man named Master Serrano has been entering the tournament and winning, but using cheating and unorthodox strategies. Master Serrano was mentioned in Cobra Kai Season 6 Part 2 as a real person who would have known about Mr. Miyagi's history in the Sekai Takai, but we never see the actual character show up, so I figured why not use him as a rival sensei here. We see that Sam and Miguel prepare to enter the tournament just in case, as they continue to learn about the importance of the team's unity in Miyagi-Do. Here, we get to add a scene where we flash back to the Sekai Takai, to a match before Miguel came back from the valley. We'd find out that Kenny actually arrived first before Johnny and Miguel, but immediately had to jump into a match during the tournament. If you've seen our video of rewriting Cobra Kai Season 6 Parts 1 and 2, you may recognize this scene as this is the duos competition. This was a scene I had pitched a while ago, and I decided to implement it here. Here, we'd get to see multiple duos have to compete in the tournament without Miguel, and we'd get to basically have a moment that highlights the other fighters as their finale or their finals before we focus on the captain's finals. We'd get to see Sam and Robby work together, Kenny and Devin, and finally Demetri and Eli. Kenny and Devin would compete and they'd do well, but Kenny would realize that this wasn't the All Valley anymore and it was going to be a lot more difficult. Sam and Robby would also enter, and they are doing a little bit better as Robby is slowly getting his mojo back. We'd get a moment where they fight alongside each other just like the old days, using the wheel technique. And finally, Demetri and Eli would compete together as a team and have to put aside their rivalry or their issues, causing Demetri to realize that him and Eli need to talk, setting up the locker room scene. Sam recounts to Miguel how strong a duo in sync was, so that they can strengthen themselves in Miyagi-Do. Episode 4 sees the pair participate in the Obon dance, and get to participate with each other in the tea ceremony, much like Kumiko and Daniel. This episode will mainly be a celebration episode. That is until the tournament actually begins, and Master Serrano's students don't have any challengers. The reason there wouldn't be any challengers is because since Chosen has been in the valley helping Daniel and Johnny, he hasn't really trained anyone in Okinawa, so there's no one here to participate. That is until Sam and Miguel sign up to face off against them, representing Team Miyagi-Do. The finale episode would go through the tournament. As Miguel uses his signature move, the tornado kick, Sam gets to learn her own signature move from Taki, called the Mantis technique. The Mantis strike would consist of 2 piercing jabs to the chest and a punching block. Luckily, in the end, Miguel and Sam are able to become Obon Karate champs, protecting Miyagi-Do's legacy and keeping their honor alive. We then jump to our second spin-off, where we have our second power couple, being Robbie Keane and Tory Nichols. This spin-off would follow Tory and Robbie as they head off to their first tournament together without their senseis. And I'll be completely honest, this was the one that was the most difficult to make into a story, due to it mainly being a tournament, but I'll do my best. Episode 1 follows Tory and Robbie as they receive the invite to a tournament called the Iron Will. It's a tournament for all martial artists to participate. Tory and Robbie prepare and they end up recruiting Mike Barnes as their traveling sensei, since Barnes would probably be the person with the most experience with this. The trio then pack up and head off preparing for their next tournament. Episode 2 would pick up as they make it to the tournament, showcasing their first few rounds in the actual tournament. And eventually, they would begin to make brand new rivals with the previous champions. This is where we'd actually connect the spin-off to another project in the Karate Kid franchise, that being Karate Kid 2010. Although Karate Kid 2010 is not my favorite project in the Karate Kid franchise, we are going to be using certain characters from that film. Robbie's main rival would be revealed to be Chang from the film, and he would be joined by a brand new female character to rival Tory Nichols. Episode 3 would see the pair struggling but still doing fairly well as they make their way through the tournament together. They also might run into some old opponents such as Dublin Thunder or other dojos from the Sekai Takai. And this episode would simply end with them being coached by Barnes and making it all the way to the semifinals. Episode 4 would show the two competing in the semifinals and making it through together. They remember how during the Sekai Takai, since they were separated, the two both struggled in the tournament a lot more. You could even add a new flashback scene showing the both of them being distracted while they fought against teams like the Hornet's Nest or even the Scorpions. They remember that they fight the strongest minded when they are united. And with that mentality, they make it past the semifinals, preparing for one final fight. The final episode would show the pair making it into the competition against Chang and his partner. As they fight against them, the two would eventually end with a victory, as Tory and Robbie both beat their opponents, becoming the new champions of the tournament, earning Robbie his first big tournament win, alongside Tory, bringing the two close together. We then come to our third spin-off, which I'll be honest, this was the easiest one to write. So let's begin with the Binary Brothers spin-off. The spin-off would follow Demetri and Eli at Caltech, until they are once again roped into all the karate drama. Episode 1 begins with the duo doing pretty well in college and thriving. Recently, Eli has kind of been itching to get back into a fight. Meanwhile, Demetri doesn't really mind the karate avoidance. Although the two have been keeping up with their training, they haven't had to use it since they left the valley. Eli stumbles across news of a brand new tournament that is a two-man tournament between colleges called the Burning Fist. Demetri wants to avoid the tournament and the chaos, but Eli is again wanting to jump into a fight. Eli tries to whittle Demetri down, and eventually his tone does change once two rivals from MIT's team called the Alpha Elites begin targeting Yasmin and Moon when they visit the Binary Brothers. In the words of the theme song to Karate Kid Part 2, they will fight to protect their honor. So, Demetri and Eli enter the tournament. Episode 2 picks up shortly after they signed up. Now, if you couldn't tell, this spin-off connects to the next Karate Kid, since the Alpha Elites were the Cobra Kai of that film. Here, they're being taught once again by Ned Randall. But Demetri and Eli quickly realize they may need a sensei's help, and they don't really have many people they can ask. Due to the fact that Daniel and Johnny are in the valley training their own students, Chosen is in Okinawa with Miguel and Sam, and Barnes is with Robby and Tory. they're kind of out of options. Luckily, Eli starts looking elsewhere and finds out about a person who beat the elites and was a Miyagi-Do student, aka Julie Pierce. Demetri is shocked as he finds out and reveals that Julie is actually his aunt that he hasn't had much contact with, hence why neither of them know that they're Miyagi-Do students. This is a spin off of a theory that was going on for season 6's airing, that Julie Pierce was actually Demetri's mother, but instead here she's his aunt, as to not bring up so many questions. Julie eventually agrees to train the Binary Brothers for the tournament, especially finding out that they're going against the Alpha Elites. Episode 3 would show Julie focusing on Eli's balance and his creativity. Meanwhile, Demetri focuses on his foundation and precision while training them both. Luckily, the two are able to make it pretty far into their own brackets in the tournament, as they keep moving on. The two continue to do well, but Demetri is still not fully confident. Meanwhile, Eli is, well, being his flashy self. The two continue to protect Yasmin and Moon as best they can as they continue to head up. Episode 4 would show the Binary Brothers are able to make it all the way to the semifinals. But before the semifinal fight, they decide to join all the other dojos in a celebration, until they're ambushed by a dojo they ended up eliminating. Luckily, during the brawl, they end up finding out that they have two allies in there helping them, that being Maria Alvarez and Diego Aguilar from Furia de Pantera. This would be a scene that allows the characters to catch up and actually have some closure that we didn't get in Cobra Kai Season 6 Part 3. They thank each other for the help in this specific brawl and also the Sakai Takai brawl. Furia de Pantera reminds them to be confident and to remember their fundamentals, and that the fundamentals will carry them further than just random flashes. A lesson Maria learned in Cobra Kai Season 6. If you want some more information on that, check out our Rivals video on Cobra Kai. The Binary Brothers end up moving on to the finals to face down the Alpha Elites. Now, Episode 5 shows the pair training and preparing for the finals under Julie's guidance. Demetri is nervous, but Eli and Julie encourage him. Eli is prepared to go all the way, but he wants to be able to lead Demetri as best he can. Yasmin and Moon do put in their 2 cents, encouraging the Binary Brothers. The Binary Brothers reminisce about how they've been able to pull together throughout all the things they've gone through, even drudging up some things that maybe they haven't brought up. Demetri ends up calling Sam for encouragement that highlights the brother-sister relationship they had that we didn't get to focus on too much. Julie tells Hawk to play to his strengths, aka using the air, and tells Demetri to focus on his precision, teaching him a move called the Scorpion Sting. This move allows Demetri to use his precision to hit the collarbone and then hit the liver with a knife hand. The Binary Brothers enter the finals, and luckily they become champs in their own divisions, winning both sides for Team Miyagi-Do. And Demetri even earns his own nickname, being the Scorpion, to go alongside Hawk and El Serpiente, concluding our 3rd spin-off story. Now, like I said previously, some of these stories had a bit more leeway to make a more fleshed out story, like the Binary Brothers one compared to Robby and Tory's. But hopefully all of these make sense and seem to be entertaining. The way these stories can be presented, I can see 2 different ways. The first is to make each of these spin-offs their own individual show. But due to the fact that I've only made 5 episode formats, you could probably do it our other way better. That would be combining these all into one show, but releasing them in 3 parts, much like Cobra Kai Season 6. The first part would be released showing Miguel and Sam's story, the second part being Robby and Tory's story, and the final part being Demetri and Eli's story. Now we've come to our big finale, where these stories actually start to come together. This is technically the first of the 4 stories that I had written, therefore the one that has the most development, but also is probably the most shoddy. This could also be told in 2 different ways. Either one as another show continuation, or you can even release it as a film. But either way, let's begin our finale with Karate Kid Legacy. The story begins 3 years after Cobra Kai Season 6, and the previous 3 spin-offs. But it's only a few months after Karate Kid Legends. Miyagi-Do and Cobra Kai have been doing well in the Valley, and their alliance is stronger than ever. We also find out about some history that we may have missed out on. Specifically, that due to the Sakai Takai, they ended up missing out on the 2020 All-Valley Tournament, with a dojo known as Phoenix Fires winning. But in 2021, Kenny and Devin both become champions, winning the tournament overall. However, in 2022, they ended up losing to a dojo known as Lionheart. More on them in a little bit. Finally, 2023 shows Anthony actually being able to become champion. Now, just to explain why they lost in 2022 and why Anthony wins in 2023, it's simply because the only 2-time All-Valley champs that we know about are Daniel and Johnny. And I kind of wanted to keep it that special thing for the 2 main senseis. After the 2023 All-Valley Tournament, Daniel is confronted by a sensei named Jin, the leader of the Shadow Jackals. Jin reveals that he's an old rival of Miyagi-Do, even dating back to Sato and Miyagi's days. He wants the dojo gone. He was pretty okay with Miyagi-Do vanishing after 1985. But with their sudden reemergence, His anger has only fumed even more. Jin invites Miyagi-Do to his Shadow Knight tournament, but he wants the name of Miyagi-Do if he wins. That way he can bury it once and for all. Daniel and Johnny, of course, refuse to bet Mr. Miyagi's legacy, much to Jin's disappointment. But in classic Karate Kid bad guy fashion, Jin ends up sending his students to start to torment Anthony, Kenny, and Devin. But since these three actually do have training, they would hold their own. This would cause the Shadow Jackals to start to target their friends, such as Leah or other characters. Once Daniel finds out that other people are getting involved, he then decides to confront Jin, trying to shut it down again. Unfortunately, the Jackals continue to torment Johnny and Daniel's students, going so far that Jin ends up breaking into Miyagi-Do and steals the Dragon Scroll, the scroll Chosen gave Daniel in Season 3. Once Daniel finds out about this, all bets are off, as he decides to enter the tournament to regain the scroll. But of course, Johnny Lawrence isn't going to let him do it alone. As Daniel and Johnny start to sign up to the tournament, Johnny overhears that all of these dojos seem to be close friends of Jin with the exception of a few, and Jin is planning to pay off every single dojo to target Miyagi-Do first, eliminating them and their chances to get the scroll back. Knowing that their three main students would be overwhelmed having to defend themselves from every other dojo, Johnny makes a plan with Daniel. Johnny will enter the tournament as Team Cobra Kai. Meanwhile, Daniel leads Team Miyagi-Do. Cobra Kai's job for once will be to be on the defense and to protect Miyagi-Do, making sure they make it to the finals. Meanwhile, Miyagi-Do's team is to go on the offense and win the tournament at the end. Johnny and Daniel also quickly realize they need 5 students to make one team. And since they only have 3 students ready to go in, they reach out to the other main 6 to bring them in. Miguel is at Stanford, Sam is in Okinawa, Tory and Robby are in New York for a tournament, and Hawk and Demetri are at Caltech. They all end up heading back to the valley after the call to help out. But Daniel asks Robby and Tory to make one stop before they show up, since they were in New York. That's when we see Robby and Tory go to find their 10th fighter, recruiting Li Fong and his supporting cast. At the valley, we gather all the main senseis and all the main students, including Chosen, Mr. Han, Julie Pierce, Taki, Mike Barnes, Victor Leopani, and maybe even Kim Dae-yoon. They all show up to support and sensei the team. Team Miyagi-Do is represented by Robbie Keane, Samantha LaRusso, Demetri Alexopoulos, Anthony LaRusso, and Li Fong. Meanwhile, Team Cobra Kai has Miguel Diaz, Tori Nichols, Eli Hawk Moskowitz, Devin Lee, and Kenny Payne. Think of this as a story like Infinity War that follows 3 teams. In the movie Infinity War, we followed Team Captain America, Team Iron Man, and Team Thor. In this, we'd be following Team Miyagi-Do, Team Cobra Kai, and the Senseis. Once they enter the tournament, they come to find out that there's at least one dojo that didn't take the bribe, known as the Golden Cranes, making the wait a little bit easier. And they also find out one of the dojos that entered is called Lionheart. Remember, I brought them up earlier and I said I'd bring them up again. Luckily, we find out that Kenny, Devin, and Anthony are friends of one of the students on that team named Ricardo. And Ricardo agrees to help them out by trying to make sure that his team doesn't target Miyagi-Do because he's a huge fan of Miyagi-Do and Cobra Kai as a whole. Ricardo is going to be a small character, and there's a lot more detail about his story in my longer version, but I won't spend too much time on them. Just know that Ricardo is one of 2 good kids in the Lionheart dojo, alongside a girl named Aria. These 2 are kind of the ones that are leaning towards joining Miyagi-Do and Cobra Kai throughout majority of the story. Throughout multiple events, Miyagi-Do and Cobra Kai eventually make it to the semifinals, alongside Lion's Heart and Shadow Jackals. Unfortunately, Anthony LaRusso ends up getting injured, but he can still fight. But this injury causes Daniel and Johnny to worry about the safety of the kids, knowing they didn't want them to get involved in this. This causes them to contemplate whether or not they should pull out of the tournament last second, much to the kids' dismay. The Shadow Jackals then decide that Miyagi-Do is getting too close, so they ambush them, inviting them to a celebration. Luckily, Ricardo goes to find Cobra Kai and warn them of the ambush. Once Miyagi-Do and Cobra Kai reveal their alliance, the Jackals then make a bet. They decide to change the semifinals match to a 10v10 fight with Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Do versus Lionhearts and Shadow Jackals. Since Ricardo stepped in to help Miyagi-Do and Cobra Kai, he ends up getting cut from his team, but he's welcome into Miyagi-Do and Cobra Kai. Although the character can't compete in the fight, he will help them prepare for the fight after he's replaced on his team. The kids decide to compete, despite what Johnny and Daniel are considering, and they decide they will compete not only for Miyagi-Do's legacy and Cobra Kai's, but for their senseis. Miyagi-Do and Cobra Kai end up winning their final match, becoming the champions. That is until Arya tells our heroes that Jin is deciding to keep the scroll despite the bet. We then get an all-out brawl as Johnny, Daniel, and the ally senseis chase down Jin and his allies. Meanwhile, Miyagi-Do, Cobra Kai, Ricardo, Arya, Mia, Alan, and even the Golden Cranes face off against the other dojos. In the end, Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Do are able to come out on top with a solid victory, reclaiming the scroll and shutting down Jin's plans. Johnny and Daniel are extremely proud of how far their legacy has reached beyond just the valley, as the team is now dubbed the Karate Kids. I know, the story's probably a little cheesy and probably too stuffed with characters, but when I wrote that story for the first time, I couldn't help but fall in love with it and want it to be real. Anyway, these are my pitches for what you can do to continue the story of the Karate Kid and Cobra Kai even further into the future, by trying to connect all unique aspects of the universe together. Let me know your thoughts down below. What did you think of the spin-off ideas? Would you watch any of these? Do you have an idea for a spin-off that maybe I didn't bring up? Leave all your thoughts down below, but with all that being said, I'll see you all in the next one.